mann som vecklar bröd och snusbullar.
Hello everyone, hello world, it's Shauna with Disrupt Apps once again, and we're continuing on with our series. In the last tutorial we went over concatenation, and remember we constructed the hello world from these strings, and we used two different methods. We used the plus method, I like to call it, and we strung all the strings together, and we learned about how to put a white space, and then we learned about the newer and more preferred way using JavaScript string templates. And we learned about the method of using these dollar signs and the curly braces and putting in the variable that we declared, and these are called interpolation. And we learned that using the tick marks with the template strings, they respect the white spaces and they respect the line breaks. And then we went into data types, and remember we talked about how JavaScript uses a number in place of what computer science would say is an integer, and then we used strings. And then we learned about concatenating, how to concatenate numbers. What I mean by that is concatenating string numbers. And we learned about type of, and then we learned about type conversions. And it's also called typecasting or casting in the computer science realm. And we learned about the number function, and then the toString method to change an integer or a number into a string. So that was quite a bit. That was a good lesson, and there's a lot of valuable stuff you're going to take out into the real world. So now in this tutorial we are going to get into something really cool and really powerful, and we're going to learn about functions. And functions are awesome, and you're going to be using functions in so many ways, and you're going to be using functions a lot with JavaScript, and they allow you to modularize your code, which means break your code up into manageable blocks. That makes it easier for you to manage and read. And functions are both a science and an art, and you can do some massively awesome cool things with functions. And with this tutorial, it's going to be a long tutorial, but it's going to be packed full of great tips and lays a great foundation for your JavaScript future to come. Alrighty, so let's head over to our external JavaScript file that we've got going, and you can see all of our old work. And let's just go ahead and clear all of that out, and we'll come back to our web page. And once again, we're going to be working in our developer tools, so go ahead and hit the F12 key. I said key this time instead of button. So let's get into functions. Now the first thing you need to do is you have to declare a function, and we always start off with a keyword. And I need to remind you, which reminds me, I need to talk about keyword. And keyword, when you see that in computer science or JavaScript, so the concept of a keyword is, in a programming language like JavaScript, there's going to be inbuilt words that are whole to that language. And so if you remember, we use things like let, and let is called a keyword. We use something called var, and var is a keyword, and are used to say, hey, this is going to be a variable, and this is going to be used to variable. So you can't use let equal gibberish. And you can see right here that this thing is complaining, and that's because you cannot use a keyword standalone as a variable, because it'll confuse the programming, the JavaScript programming. And the same thing here with var. And let me see, if you come here, it's going to do another blue var, and it's going to complain with the red thing. So let me go ahead and let's see, JavaScript keywords. All right, and so you'll also hear the word, all right, so you also see reserved words, right? So like it says here in JavaScript, you cannot use these reserved words as variables, labels, or function names. So we have all these things like abstract, byte, case, break, final, function. So you can't use these as variables because these are reserved for the language itself. So I just wanted to go ahead and let you know about that, and I'll go ahead and put the link to this so you can have access to it. All right, sorry for that diversion. So the first thing we need to do, getting back, is we need to declare a function. And the way that you do that is you start off with the word function. So the next thing we need to do is we need to give it a name. So let's do test function underscore 0, 0, and then we need to put an open and close of parentheses, and we'll go ahead and do an open and close curly braces. So that's the basic standard syntax. In syntax, I haven't used that word yet. In syntax, how do you say it? Syntax is a way or method of typing something, like its structure. We can think of it like grammatic structure, but it's like its structure. So the syntax of a function, you'll have your name, your function name, then you're going to have parentheses, and we'll learn how to pass arguments and parameters into these later on. And then you have your curly braces, and then in here we're going to have our executable code. All right, so we'll be doing stuff in here, and when we run this function, when we call this function, when we invoke this function, we're going to execute some code. So let's go ahead and do some really basic stuff. Let's stick with console.log. Okay, let's go ahead and put in here, let's just copy the name, and we're not going to put the function in here, we're just going to use the name, right, as a string. Test function underscore 00 fired. Okay, Control S to save. Well, let's see what happens. Let's come to our web page, refresh. Well, nothing happened, nothing showed up. Well, here we declare the function, but it's not going to do anything. You actually have to call the function, or what is also known as invoke the function. And there are many ways that you can do this. And for this tutorial, I'll show you some really simple ways to do that, and just using the console log. And we'll build our skills to where we'll actually be executing functions from our HTML with a button. Okay, so the way that you can call or invoke a function is after you've declared your function and you've put the block of code that you want to execute, you just come down here and do test function, and you can see here that it already recognizes it. VS Code already recognizes it. And then go ahead and terminate with the parentheses and the semicolon, and hit Control S. So what's happening is this script is saying, hey, we have a function called test function underscore 00, and when we execute this, when we call it, when we invoke this function, we're going to console log this string of text. And then, well, we have to make it happen, right? And the way you do this is you come down here and then you call or invoke the function. You have to say this, hey, you have to take its name and you have to call it, invoke it, okay? So let's hit Control S to save, come back to our web page and refresh. And hey, test function fired. So you have just created your first of many JavaScript functions to come. Cool. So there is, in JavaScript, there is something called a self-invoking function. And the way, so instead of having to call this function down here in the script, there's a way with the syntax that you can just execute a function when this JavaScript runs. And the way that you do this, it's just go ahead and watch me type it out. You have that, and then you have function, and we'll say test function underscore self-invoked. Okay? And then you'll want to go ahead and do your parentheses. Come over here, do your curly braces pair, make some space, and then come down here, and you want to do another pair of parentheses. Go ahead and hit the closing semicolon. So let's go ahead and just copy this. We'll paste this here. And let's copy the name. And then we're going to go here and paste it. So it says console log test function underscore self-invoked fired. And so if everything worked, it should work. So Control S to save. Let's come back to our web page, refresh, and we have test function self-invoked fired. So when you run this kind of, let me go ahead and comment up here, self-invoking function. So when you use your self-invoking or self-invoked function or self-called function, whenever this script runs, because of the way this syntax is created when they built JavaScript, when the interpreter or the rendering engine sees it and it recognizes this syntax pattern, it's just going to say, hey, we're going to fire this off. And we don't have to come in here and explicitly call it. So self-invoking functions are going to be a very powerful tool for you to use when you want to render out content on your page. And I'll show you how we'll use self-invoking functions to write very efficient code for your web apps and your web applications. So I just want to make you aware you have these functions types that you have to invoke manually, and then you have these self-invoking functions that execute when the script is run. The next thing I want to talk about, let's make some space down here, is I want to talk about functions with arguments, can't spell, parameters. Okay. So if you remember up here, this is our standard syntax. Okay. So let's come down here and function, and we'll do test function with, and we'll just say params, short for parameters. And then go ahead and do the opening, closing parentheses, and then you've got your curly braces. Oops. So there's a reason why they have the open and closing parentheses here, because what you can do is you can put or pass variables in here. And you can think of it like, how do you say, like if you studied biology and you remember about the electron transport chains and the phospholipid bilayers, and like these atoms or whatever molecules would come in and they would pass through this little narrow gap and come in here. Well, what this is you can type in something like X, or it can even be as simple as some text. And what this is going to do is whatever you put in here, it's going to push it into, it'll incorporate it into the body of the function itself. Alrighty, so now let's make a variable called let passed param string. So we're going to pass a string into this function. Okay, and we'll say past parameter string, okay, period. Okay, so what we'll do is you need to put something in here, and it can be anything. And let's go ahead and put X, because that's really simple to understand. So what we'll do now is we'll say console.log, and then we're just going to put X here, right? So nothing's going to happen just yet. We're setting everything up for it to work. And because this function is not self-invoked, it's not one of these kinds, it's a manually, you have to manually call it or invoke it, like we did up here. We need to come down here and start typing test function with params, like we have up on line 27. And so what you're going to do is terminate it, like we have with the semicolons, and you're going to take your variable past param string, which will be this text, all of this text. So let's copy that. Let's paste it in here. So let's review what we have. We've got our variable, which is equal to the string past parameter string. We have our function called test function with param, and we're going to have one parameter in here, and it's going to be put into console log here. And then the way that you pass the parameter is using, when you invoke the function down here, you're going to pass your string into here. Now let's go ahead and hit Control S to save, and let's see what happens. Okay, refresh. And here we go. We have past parameter string. Now, what happens if we just copy the string itself and we paste the string in here? Well, let's see what happens. We'll come in here, we'll hit refresh again, and it works. So basically, you can think of it, this function is taking a parameter and it's just taking the X, and it's basically saying this X is in here, and it's going to console log that. So now the really cool thing, the really powerful thing with these passing parameters and these functions is you can build your own functions with multiple parameters. So X, Y, and Z. Let's try this out, shall we? So let me go ahead and come down here. We'll do a console log X. We'll paste it a couple times. We'll do a Y. And we'll do a Z. Okay? So how about we come down into our parameters, and you need to notice that each of these parameters are separated by a comma, and that's very important, or else it won't work. So how about we just come in here and we just put in some numbers or some integers. Let's do 9, 7, and 4. So what's going to happen? Well, Control S to save, come back to our web page, and a console, refresh, and we get 9, 7, and 4. So we've passed 9, 7, 4 into this function, and we're console logging it out. All right. So how about this? Now, one thing you can do is you can come out here, and you have to be careful with this when you go on, but you're allowed to do it. You can hit X, let X equals 9, let Y equals 7, and let Z, not X, Z equals 4. Okay? So let's go ahead and delete this. Now, we talked about scope when we're talking about execution of our HTML, right, and JavaScripts. Here, like we talked about up in the head, and external style, external scripts, and then scripts in the body. We talked about why they didn't work because of the placement. You also have scope when you're dealing with functions. And even though, so really briefly, these in JavaScript, all of these functions in JavaScript, all of these variables, they're going to have a global scope. You don't have to explicitly say make these global. They're going to be recognized all throughout the script, which is good, and it also can lead to confusion. And that's why I'm pointing this out right now. Now, in here you have kind of like a mini scope, and just because you put X, Y, and Z here doesn't mean it's automatically going to work, right? So let's go ahead and just, for now, let's leave this blank. Control S to save, come back to our page, refresh, undefined. And it's undefined because we didn't publish, we didn't put any parameters in here, all right? And that's because the console log says, hey, I don't know what to do. Nothing's been assigned because we didn't assign the parameters, right? Now, even though this X, you may think this is 9 and this is Y and this is Z. Well, it'll work that way, but what happens if we change this to A, B, and C, right? So what's going to happen, let's take X and we'll come in here and type in X, and then Y, and then Z. Okay, X, Y, and Z. Let me go ahead and put it up here real quick just to show you. So now X is equal to 9. So you can think like 9 is going to be put in here because we're representing it with this variable. Y is going to be 7, so 7 is going to be passed in here, and Z is going to be passed in this position here. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. A, B, C. Sorry about that. So look how they line up. The first index, which is something you're going to learn about here shortly. The first place, the first position is here. The second argument, the second position is Y and B. And the third position is Z. So think of it as slots. So slot 1 is A, slot B is slot 2, and C is slot 3. So X is going to be in slot 1, Y is going to be in slot 2, and Z is going to be in slot 3. So let me go ahead and move this down here. Paste it. So what's going to happen is we're going to pass in X here, Y here, Z here, and well, let's see what happens now. And note, I have X, Y, and Z. I didn't change it. Well, we get 9, 7, and 4. Well, why is that? Because up here we have a global scope. And this console log is going to find this global scope up here, right? It's going to find this X. And then Y, it's going to find this console log is going to see on the global scope 7. And then Z is going to find the 4, right? So it's not using these to pass in there, all right? Let me show you why that is not the case. So let's go ahead and type in 88, 44, and 33. Control S to save. Come back here and hit refresh. Okay, so we plug these numbers in, but once again, we have 9, 7, and 4. Well, why aren't we getting 88, 44, and 33? Because it's a scope issue. We need to refer to these parameters that we declared within the opening and closing parentheses. So let's go ahead, just for fun, let me go ahead and copy this, paste it here, Control S to save. Now let's put A, B, and C. Okay, so down here we're passing 88, we're passing 44, and we're passing 33 into A, B, and C. But on the global scope, we have X is 9, Y is 7, Z is 4. And this should be pretty clear now how I set everything up so you'll understand it. Come to our console and refresh. So now you can see we've got 88, 44, and 33, which correspond to the numbers that we passed here. And you can see A, B, and C are with these console logs. And then we've got the X, Y, and Z, which are referencing these things. And that's why down below you see 9, 7, and 4. So that whole spiel of like, where while you can do things like this, you have to be careful. You have to be careful with these things, or things won't work the way you expected them to, right? All right. Yeah, these can be very confusing, and I might have lost you, but you just need to be careful, and you need to plan out what your you need to plan out ahead of time what your variable names are going to be. All right, so one thing that I need to clarify here, I've been throwing around the terms arguments and parameters. Now, a lot of people, myself included, might interchange these and use them interchangeably, but there's a slight nuance that I need to point out, and even I mess up with this sometimes. And you know, we talked about passing values into these parentheses, right? Well, the function, the parameters are used when you actually construct the function. So X, Y, and Z are the actual, we call these parameters. And that's why I used param before, right? And so actually down here, when you actually invoke or call the function, these are the actual arguments. Because how can I put this? If you're a geek, you hear things about, well, the parameters are, let's see how I can do a example. How about RGB? So, you know, RGB has 3 colors. It has a we'll just say R color, a G green color, and a B color, red, green, and blue, right? So you need 3 parameters to make a color. You need a red parameter, you need a green parameter, and a blue parameter, right? So you set the parameters up with the function. Now when you actually go to put your values into the function when it's invoked, when you call it, these are where you put the arguments. And let's go with like 255, 144, and 88 or 99. I have no idea what color that is, but just roll with me. So we're saying red 255, green 144, blue 99, right? So these are the arguments, right? So we're arguing, you could say like that, well, 255, 144, 99. No, I want 225, 174, 23. So you can argue, you can think of it like that. We're going to argue and say, I want this, I want that, I want this, I want that. So it's going to say whatever argument that you make in here, we're going to accept those in the function as a parameter. And that might be a little like confusing, but that's just getting into the lexicon or the terminology, the technobabble for us developers. So, you know, again, I just wanted to clarify that. So when you hear arguments and parameters, you'll hear them interchangeably used, and that's okay because we know what you mean. We know what you're trying to accomplish, but parameters are actually used with the function itself, and the arguments are passed into the invoked function. So I wanted to go ahead and clear that up. So we touched on this a little bit earlier about scope, and I know this was a little bit confusing with the X, Y, and Z, so I want to go ahead and make it a little bit more clear with the functions and scope. So I'm just going to go ahead and comment all that out so we can simplify things. And let's go ahead and comment all of this out. And comment all this out so we can get back to a clean console. All right. So now we want to talk about JavaScript scope. Okay. All right. So let's declare a variable called global scope variable underscore 00 equals to 22. Okay, let's come down here and create a function test function underscore x, and come here, console.log parentheses semicolon. We'll go ahead and copy our global scope var underscore 00, paste it there, and then because it's not self-invoking, it's not, and we need to go ahead and call this function test, not text, test function x, and go ahead and finish it out. So if everything worked right, we're going to be calling this globally scoped variable, and then come here, refresh, and we've got our integer, our number of 22. So let's go ahead and create, let local scope variable underscore 00 equal to 44. So let's come here and do console.log, and let's go ahead and just copy that variable. We'll paste it, Control S to save, and let's see what happens. We've got 44. All right. Now let's do kind of the same below, and let's go function test function underscore y, and finish it out. So let's go ahead and try to console log this variable, this local scope that we declared inside this test function. Okay, let's paste it there. So you can see they have these little dotted lines, and you'll learn what that means. And you'll recognize that thing. It's saying, hey, there might be a problem. So let's go ahead and let's call the test y function. So we're calling both the x, the test function x, and test function y. And let's see what happens. Okay, we'll come back to our page and hit refresh. Well, we have an error, and it says uncaught reference error. And it says it's on our global scripts on line 22, and it says local scope var underscore 00 is not defined. Okay, so we'll come back to our page and we'll say 22, and it's complaining where we saw these three dots. It's complaining, I don't know what this is. JavaScript, I have no idea what this is. And that's because when you code with JavaScript and you use functions, this local variable is declared inside this test function. So if you try to call it inside here, it can't see it. You got to think of this as like a container. It can't go in here and see it. But you got to think of this whole, you got to think this global thing is all, it can be accessed by all the functions. And to prove that, let's go ahead and copy the global from up here, paste it, Control S. Now let me go ahead and comment this out so we'll make it work. Come back here, refresh, and see here on line 22, we got our integer 22, right? So now it works because it can access the global variable, right? So you need to be mindful of your scope, because when you get really hot and heavy and deep into your code, you might forget to make your variables global, right? We're going to learn about nesting functions later on, but you might lose track of your scope, your global variable, and it'll freak out and not, it won't work like we proved down here. So when you design your code, when you design your JavaScript functions and your variables, you need to plan out like what are going to be local and global scope variables, right? So let me do another example to make it clear. Okay, let's go ahead and say we'll copy that and we'll just change a couple things. You can see that it's screaming at us with these red squiggly lines, and it's saying, hey, we've got two of the same, we don't like that, so let's come in here and we'll make this 55, right? So we have global scope var 01, global scope var 00 and 01. And then let's just go ahead and delete that. I want to go ahead and delete this test function, clean up the code a little bit. So we're going to declare a local variable, let total equal, we'll go ahead and copy that and hit plus. Really simple math here. So we're going to add these two together, 22 and 55, through variables, right? So in this case, these are still going to be global variables, right? And total will be a local variable. Okay, and then console.log, the total here, and then we need to invoke the function. We need to call the function. Paste it down below, Control S to save, and refresh, and we have 77. And just to clarify once more, these are global and total is local. So what happens if we come down here below and we say console.log and we try to console log out the total? And if you remember, the total worked in here, right? Because it's contained within the test function underscore x. It's contained as a local variable in this function. But outside of this, well, let's see what happens. Okay, once again, uncaught reference error. Total is not defined. JavaScript 24. And then come here, JavaScript 24. And once again, this is a scope issue, because when you declare a variable inside of a function, it's going to be contained inside that function, and if you use it out here, it won't work. So, fun times. Well, this is getting to be a very long video, so I wanted to introduce a thing called a loop and an array, but I think I'm going to put that for the next lesson, because I think this is a lot of stuff to have learned in one lesson, and it's probably a long video already. So with that, I'm going to get me some coffee, relax a little bit, and then work on the loop and array tutorial. I will see you later. Bye-bye.